On this week's show, the Georgia Southern men's basketball team continue to impress, while the Eagle baseball team gets ready for their season opener in Athens. All that and more as we welcome you inside the Eagles Nest. And welcome inside the Eagles Nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by Mike Anthony, the Georgia Southern beat writer and sports editor for the Statesboro Herald. And Mike, this is the time when sports start to overlap. We have Georgia Southern baseball getting their season underway this weekend in Athens. And of course, we have the Georgia Southern men's and women's basketball teams, both, I guess, vying for spots. The women right now trying to get into that 8th spot so they can make the Sun Belt tournament. The guys, looks like they could go anywhere from 3rd, maybe down to 6th or 7th. Looking good right now. The guys went on the road and split. Let's begin with them. They went on the road and had to come back and beat Troy, a team that's pretty much in the bottom in the Sun Belt, but road wins are always important. Then they went to South Alabama. Got behind, came back, fought back strong, ended up losing a tough one. Now they got some home games coming up. Your thoughts on where the guys are?
Well, a good start to the weekend for the men's team. Going into the weekend, they were one of the hotter teams in the Sun Belt with that win against Troy. They got up to a tie for 5th place in the Sun Belt. They had won 4 in a row. But the big loss in that game was Ike Smith. He went down early in that game, rolled an ankle, didn't play against South Alabama, still up in the air as to his status for this coming week. And then they go to Mobile, kind of like Troy was last year for him, where Troy was at the bottom while Georgia Southern was surging, but they were just a thorn in their side, and South Alabama's been the same way. They got out to a big lead in Hanner and held off a Georgia Southern comeback. They do the same thing in Mobile, up by 19 at one point in the second half. The Eagles cut it all the way down, actually tie it with a minute to go, but South Alabama scores the final bucket. Georgia Southern, a couple of looks at the end, can't get either of them to go down, but the way the rest of the weekend played out in the conference, they're still tied for 5th place. As you said, a lot of leeway as to where they end up at the end, but right now, as long as they can take care of business against the teams that they'll be favored against down the stretch, this should be a team that's going to New Orleans for the tournament.
Coming up this week, we have Thursday and Saturday, Arkansas State and Arkansas Little Rock. They split with those teams on the road, so there's some hope that they can maybe sweep them. One of those two teams happens to be on top in the Sun Belt standings, though, so it could be a tough task.
Yeah, Little Rock definitely took care of business against the Eagles when they went out to Little Rock just a couple of weeks ago. Arkansas State, on the other hand, going a different direction. They're down to about 7 scholarship players. Some injuries, some disciplinary issues have really hurt them, but still a dangerous team. Actually beat Little Rock earlier this season. For the Eagles, it's all about consistency. We've talked about how young this team is. We've seen the upside over the last couple of weeks when they finally find their shooting. Their defense falls into line. This is a very tough team with a lot of raw talent, but then we saw the downside against South Alabama. You take a guy like Ike out of the mix, and all of a sudden that chemistry gets a little jumbled up. It seemed like they had a hard time really figuring out how to get into a rhythm. So hopefully they've taken the last couple of days, they've gotten back into sync, they have a good game plan, and they really need to at least split this weekend, but it would be great to defend the home court and get 2 wins.
All right, well, speaking of wanting to get some home wins, Kip Drown's women right now on the outside looking in if the Sun Belt tournament started today. Luckily for them, they've got quite a few home games coming up and maybe can make up some ground. It's going to be tough to do it against both of these teams, Arkansas State and Arkansas Little Rock. Pretty tough. One of the two, as we just mentioned, is kind of running away with the Sun Belt at this point.
This definitely is the cream of the crop of the Sun Belt. Little Rock, the champions last year, stumbled a little early, but they're coming on strong down the stretch. And then there's Arkansas State, which is kind of playing in a league of its own. Undefeated in conference play, really haven't been challenged as of yet. The Eagles weren't able to do that in Jonesboro when they went up there a couple of weeks ago. And this is looking like a rough weekend for the Eagles. However, looking at the schedule, although they're 4-10, it could be a little worse than that after this week. But they've still got games against the teams at the bottom of the standings, the teams that they're vying for that 8th and final spot in the conference tournament. If they can take care of those games, they might have a chance. Of course, it would really help to find some magic and pull an upset at some point this week.
Thursday night, following the ladies' loss to Arkansas State, the guys looking for the season sweep, and they'd start out red hot. Jake Alsmiller from the corner. Alsmiller then from NBA range with the friendly bounce here. More from Alsmiller. Another three-pointer. he wasn't the only Eagle hitting from long distance. Ike Smith drains one. Later in transition, the kick out to Alsmiller. He'd finished with 17 points and 5 3-pointers. Tukey Brown letting it rip, but this one only a long 2. Eagles by 7. Ike Smith continuing to show no ill effects from a recent ankle injury. He'd have 10 points. Back to Tukey we go, this time for 3. He finished with 15, one of 5 Eagles in double figures. How about Mike Hughes? Here he hits 3 of his team-high 18 points. Eagles up 49-22 at the half. Second half more the same. Tukey, the 3, and the foul. Eagles up 32. Hughes later step back 3. GSU up by 36 points. Hughes later with the corner 3. Georgia Southern 13 for 40 from behind the arc. Hughes later going in for the reverse. Ike Smith will then miss, but Monte Glenn there for the rebound and the putback. And finally on the break, Devontae Boykins with the layup, and then check out who comes walking by. Arkansas State head coach John Brady after his second technical. He heads over and out the exit as the Eagles win 90-59. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit and head over to the Diamond where the Georgia Southern baseball team gets things underway this weekend on the road at the Georgia Bulldogs. We have a local guy going up to Georgia from Statesboro High, Blakely Brown, who may or may not be playing this weekend, but we do know Georgia Southern's going up there with the hopes of winning these games, and they've got a lot of starters returning. Pitching staff looks pretty good, and they start the game with Evan Challenger. You got to feel like anytime he takes the mound, you got a chance of winning.
Evan Challenger, a great story last year. Wasn't sure what to expect of him. He had started off his Georgia Southern career well, then he went down, needed Tommy John surgery. You never know how a young guy's going to bounce back. He took the ball on opening night last season, and he kept it on Friday night throughout the season. Finished second place in the Sun Belt in terms of ERA, just over 2. He'd love to have a repeat performance. I'd love to get that off to a good start against Georgia. And this isn't quite the same state of mind as we had in football season going up to Athens, where you would just be proud of the good showing, even though they almost got the win. Here, I think Georgia Southern expects to win. It's always tough to win on the road, but don't forget the Eagles swept Georgia at home last season. In fact, they've gotten the better of Georgia the last 10 times, or a winning record over the last 10 meetings against the Bulldogs. So this is an Eagle team that fully expects to come home from Athens with more wins than losses.
Looking at the team this year, position-wise, your thoughts on where they are? They've still got a little bit of pop. They've got some returning guys like Cleveland at first, and some players that will notice, but maybe they're playing different positions, and a couple of them right now are you're trying in early season to kind of find out, throw some things at the wall and see what sticks.
Right. During the first couple of weeks, Rodney Hennon, head coach of the Eagles, he's definitely going to shift some things around, find out where the best fit in the field and the batting order is for his team. Nothing's set in stone yet. I think that on Friday night you'll see a lot of familiar faces in that opening night lineup. You mentioned Ryan Cleveland at first base, Bradsell behind the plate. You've got Logan Baldwin back in the outfield, Kent Rollins manning the middle infield, Evan Challenger, of course, on the mound. A couple of new faces, some JUCOs, some freshmen that'll have to step up right away. And hopefully, if the Eagles have a lead, you'll see some familiar guys coming out of the bullpen. Chris Brown, very effective at the end of games last year, will be looking to do the same this season. But the biggest hole in the lineup right now, Hunter Thomas, tied for second on the team last year with 10 home runs. He knocked in 36. He was injured in a preseason practice. Coach Hennon expects him out for about a month. So really a shot to the offensive abilities of the Eagles. Hopefully they can hold serve, win some games, get him back into the lineup, and really get moving.
Yeah, not a lot of power on this team. Losing somebody like Hunter Thomas is a big gap, as you mentioned. Hopefully he can get back soon. We did have a chance to talk with head coach Rodney Hennon about the upcoming season and the series with Georgia.
Knew going in, it's a good league, and I think that held true last year as we went through the first conference season and finished up in fourth place, just 2 games out of first. So that tells you about the depth of the league, and I think the competitiveness within the league. The fact that the top 4 or 5 teams, were right there, battling those last couple of weekends. But we're excited about the second year in the league and looking forward to the challenge and certainly looking forward to playing a quality opponent this weekend in Athens. I think one thing we've had to focus on is just getting back to some of the fundamentals. At times maybe we've relied on the home run a little bit too much. So we've focused really hard in the offseason on trying to put the ball in play and find ways to get on base and pressure the defense a little bit more and manufacture runs. I think typically as you move on and get late in the season and tournament time, when you face really good pitching, it's those little things that you have to do to win championships. Evan's an outstanding leader for us. Has done a tremendous job on the field and off the field. Here this summer in the off season, we had 10 freshmen on campus. He was still around, taking classes and working, kind of taking those guys under his wing, and just a really good job setting the example day in and day out. And it's nice to have a guy like that can go out and start the weekend off for you. Well, we're a little less experienced, but we feel like there's a lot of talent there. And the thing that I've liked with this group as we went through the off season, as we've gone through practice, is I see this team making a progression every weekend when we go out here and scrimmage, and that's the key. That's what you want to see is that we get better as we go. And I think this is a great test for us right out of the gate. This is why you play college baseball. You come to play against good people and play in good environments, and we got an opportunity to do that this weekend in Athens.
And before we go, one final note: the Georgia Southern softball team notched a win this past week, had to go on the road to Mississippi State, where their head coach is from, as far as being an assistant coach on the staff there with the Bulldogs at one point, Annie Smith. Congratulations to them. They'll be home pretty soon, and we'll let you know how things are going with softball as well. Well, that'll wrap things up for now. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again next week.